Yes. I know I gave an impression that I was not with my face. Sorry. Welcome back. We hope you had a great week. Our week, of course, just beginning here on the Fantasy Football Show on the Fantasy Football Channel. We appreciate everybody hanging with us. We're not going to ask much of you today, except that you hit that thumbs up button and you are subscribed. That's key here as we continue to grow this space. The crew is in the house here. Tara is with us. Matt is back with us. Matt, it's the first time that we've seen you, so we hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Tara and I talked at length about sides and the go-to sides and the sides you avoid and all of that. So we don't want to inundate you with stuff that we've already done, but we just hope you had a good Thanksgiving, brother.
I did. And I hope you guys did as well. Really thrilled to be back with you all. Sad now that I missed that debate. Darn it. That sounds fun. But I'm excited to get into this week. We got a lot of injuries to break down and another clunker of a Thursday night matchup, if I might add.
Absolutely. And look, Tara, I've never spoken for you before. I won't hear, but if I may, just this one small time, let me say, Matt, if you're anti-cranberry sauce, you're good here.
Yes.
I am not prioritizing cranberry sauce on the Thanksgiving plate.
I love it. Underway to the field.
We're doing well already, guys.
Excellent. All right. So we've got a busy one here. Tara, you doing all right? Everything going well with you on your end?
I'm doing great. It's Friday. We're so close to Sunday football. So yeah, I couldn't be happier.
Nice. I love it. I love it. And Matt, you mentioned last night the clunker that is. And here's the thing. It wasn't even really Thursday night football. I mean, technically a game was being played on Thursday night, but it wasn't a short week for either of these teams. It's just how bad and brutal, really just lifeless New Orleans offense is, especially without Alvin Kamara. It's completely night and day different. And then on the other end, it's Dallas and whatever we take away from, I think, the maddening frustration. And by all means, Matt, if you'd like to start here, what to do with Ezekiel Elliott. I think we're having this conversation. I can't believe it. Week 13 of the NFL, but the run game outside, and it's balanced, right? With frustrations with Zeke, Pollard as well, and just this Dallas offense.
Yeah, so, we had Amari Cooper, who was basically active to get his feet back under him, and that's why he was designed for a few plays, but mostly an auxiliary option. So the game plan going into this for Dallas was obviously just get the ball in their top playmakers' hands as much as possible. Unfortunately, that list included Ezekiel Elliott, because at this point, Ezekiel Elliott just doesn't run well at all behind the same line that Tony Pollard is consistently finding space within. So I don't know what else to say other than Pollard looks better on his touches. And you can, contextualize it a little bit and say, well, he's getting the ball on more pass-happy downs, and so there's lighter fronts. And no. Pollard is just the more efficient per-touch runner at this point, and that's why he's breaking off huge runs and Elliott isn't. Still 13 carries and 2 targets. That's really nothing to scoff at. That's still RB2 territory, but it's nowhere near where you drafted Ezekiel Elliott. I think Tony Pollard is a surefire flex going forward in this, and honestly, if they shut Ezekiel Elliott down for 3 games here at the very end just to get him ready for the playoffs, I wouldn't be that surprised. He's injured.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I completely agree with you that Pollard seems to be the more dynamic player who's able to break off those big runs and make those big plays that make him flex worthy. I hate to be the person that I hate it when people always are like, well, if you take out the big run, it's this and that. I hate to do that, but I am going to do it. If you take out I think it was a 58-yard run, and then you look at it, that's 7 carries for less than 20 yards. So while I do like Pollard with the more upside, and it definitely makes him usable, I'm concerned with Dallas as a whole when I'm looking at the fact that, neither one of these running backs seem to be having success behind this line. And I know it's New Orleans, and they have been reeling a little bit more on defense lately, and maybe they pulled it together better for this game, but I just get concerned when that's what I'm seeing out of their running game. So I got a little bit of a red flag here. I've got those same concerns about Ezekiel Elliott, and thank goodness that Pollard has that dynamic big play capability, because otherwise he wouldn't really be usable either.
Yeah, I think you're right, where this is becoming more and more clouded, right? To both of your points here about this team moving forward. I don't know if there's an easy solution on our end unless Dallas, to Matt's point, does something with Zeke. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, then you're either screwed and you have to make an adjustment if you're running with Zeke or if you're running with Pollard. All of a sudden things bump up exponentially. I hate to even waste a breath or two, but look, we have to, and there are plenty of people out here who are rushing for whatever unfortunate circumstance they found themselves in, two Saints players, and there is going to be a return of Kamara, and that's just a no-brainer. But I mean, Tara, just from what we've seen week in and week out of this Saints team, it's so frustrating. I can imagine if anybody is rostering a Saints player.
It's wild. We want to so badly pin down who can even be a wide receiver one in this offense. Targets seem to be there sometimes for people. Tre'Quan Smith is consistent in his targets. Deontay Harris is a bigger play guy. You've got little Jordan Humphrey making his plays too. And it's just, you feel like you can't rely on anyone in this offense to be able to provide anything. Then we've got the Taysom Hill injury news. And it's wild. The wildest takeaway from the New Orleans side for me is how ineffective he can be in terms of winning a game, but so incredibly effective from a fantasy perspective to throw 4 interceptions. And yet we still look at that and we're like, okay, if he was healthy, we would roll him out again because we know what we can get off of him.
Yeah, I agree basically there with everything you said, Tara, except I thought that Taysom Hill looked good as a passer until he got hurt. Yeah. I think we saw an injury that might require surgery, as is being reported as of Friday afternoon when we're recording the show. And it looked like every pass from that hit on out looked flat, looked underthrown, just didn't look right at all. And of course, we end up seeing some really bad looking plays that, obviously in the heat of the play, sometimes it happens where the ball just doesn't come out right, but there was just a couple of passes like in a row from Taysom Hill that just came out completely wrong, leading to interceptions. And you got to give credit to the Dallas defense, which has now become one of the most turnover happy defenses in the NFL. To a certain extent, that's high quality, but we're still talking about a team that is now down its quarterback 1, its running back 1, its wide receiver 1, and no one is really able to step up. If anything, Taysom Hill's legs were the only thing we could rely on. And if he can't pass well enough to be in the game and he does require surgery, then this whole offense becomes stay away except for Kamara.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And you're right. Kamara is the stability that we have there. All right. Lastly, I know that this is something worth mentioning. And here on the Fantasy Football Show, we don't scoff at questions. Lofty's gone until Monday. So if you want to sneak your quarterback questions in, defense questions, whatever you have. But Dallas's defense, you mentioned turnover happy here as well. So it's worth a note as far as anybody who has been rostering them week in and week out, that this has now become way more, if it hasn't already, of a consistent play, depending on, I guess, who you have. Look, you have Buffalo, Dallas, you're going back and forth. It may be one thing, but clearly there's stability there, especially with the turnovers. So that's a good sign. 4 picks that they get. All right, should we do injuries here? Daniel Jones is out. How about that? Let's start. Matt, let's start here. Daniel Jones is out. Are you rushing right now to stream Mike Glennon in a league?
I am not, Eitan, believe it or not.
I'm shocked.
Hey, if you have to, look, he's a quarterback with a pulse. He's a quarterback. Hey, a super flex league. Okay. You got some teams on a bye this week. There are some Aaron Rodgers teams out there scrapping for that 5 or 6 seed in their playoffs, and they need somebody in that second QB spot. Mike Glennon is playing the Miami Dolphins, who honestly have looked significantly better. It's not a super impressive 4-game winning streak, but it is a 4-game win streak in the NFL. Nonetheless, they are 10th best in the NFL in points allowed per play. That's tougher for opposing defenses. So honestly, this just makes me more excited about the Miami side, where you could have Tua Tagovailoa playing the game control offense that he wants to play. And, you're going to see, especially with Jalen Waddle, a short area target monster, Mike Gesicki, a short area target monster, and Myles Gaskin on the other side. Miami just is more likely to be able to play the way they want to play. And New York is probably going to turn it over twice or more in this one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And then, in addition to Mike Glennon, it looks like we're not going to see Kadarius Toney. And then we've got Sterling Shepard that's questionable as well. We're not sure about him. So we look at that receiving core and our options again are Kenny Galladay and Darius Slayton. And despite the fact that that happened last week, there just wasn't production to be had there. So again, this is an offense as a whole that you're looking at. You just really don't want a piece of it.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think by all means, when you see how everything plays out, as you mentioned, you don't want a piece of it. By all is a great way to encompass it. I did see a couple of questions on the chat here, real quick. And before we get to that, is there anything at all? I mean, look, even the running game we've seen just with Barkley's health and the inconsistencies there. Sometimes when you have a team that is just so up and down and so chaotic with who's present and on the team, there can be one guy you can look at and say, look, at least you can go here. I don't think, Taryn, I'll throw it right back. I don't think there is somebody like that on the Giants unless I'm missing someone obvious.
The only thing that I will say is that we could get into a situation where the Giants are, and their defense did play better last week against Jalen Hurts, but I think we could get into a situation where Saquon has to see upwards of 5 targets again. And if he can do that and get his little 50 yards on the ground, unfortunately, it can be a decent combination there. So I'm not pivoting far away from Saquon. He can be an RB2 for me. I think that's the only useful option here.
I mean, there was a time, if you remember, Saquon Barkley's rookie year, where if Eli Manning needed to, he was checking down to Saquon Barkley 15, 18, 19 times a game. It's possible. If Saquon Barkley is fully healthy, then they probably should, especially when Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton are your best options on the outside. But is that actually what the new offensive scheme in New York is going to feature? Who knows? If Barkley is healthy, he's talented enough to do it, but trying to predict rational coaching is usually a losing battle.
Yes, but I think you can, and look, everything has variance. I get it, but I think it's easier to predict irrational or just bad coaching than it is the opposite, right? It's hard for me to believe that they've had some gem that they're about to uncover in the world of Freddie Kitchens now taking over for Jason Garrett, just revolutionizing how they see the game and putting people in different positions. And especially as we began this here with Tara, Matt, not really having much to go with on the field. It's not like they have a full healthy offense that Freddie Kitchens can now, let me just work my magic. I don't see this offense and team right now is in trouble.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I agree.
All right. Now, on the chat, couple of questions here for us. Also, a reminder to hit that thumbs up button, please, if you haven't already. More people popping in. Make sure you're subscribed here. We have these links below for you. $10 free on Yahoo, and you can get 1 month of Awesemo Plus Platinum free. All you need to do is hit that link below, new to Yahoo, your first paid contest entry. All right, so saw at the top here, as far as a question to go with Melvin Gordon. Let's see. So Melvin Gordon or let's look at this. It wasn't really a must start. Sorry. I had the other one here, but I lost it. All right, here we go. Sue on the chat. Start Wilson or Wentz? Let's start there, Tara.
I might have to lean towards Carson Wentz against Houston. I know the thing is that obviously they'll want to run them all. It's going to be a big Jonathan Taylor day, but at least I don't think it's a game where he's going to be in a position where he can't hit a nice floor. So I'd probably go with the safety option of Carson Wentz.
I almost was like, wait, Zach Wilson? Why? No, don't. And then I realized that we're talking about benching Russell Wilson. It took me a minute, but I understand. I actually think I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I'm going with Carson Wentz too.
Yeah.
I'm shocked, but hey, the one thing I will say is that Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett were able to connect for some deep passes. That was really the big thing I wanted to see is can they get back on the same page with the deep ball, which is something that the Seattle offense, which is fairly conservative and then mixes things up with big, deep shots. They don't have those chunk play abilities. You don't want Russell Wilson because he's not rushing anymore at this point in his career. So Wentz against Houston is, I think, the safer play.
Yeah. And you make a really good point there about the fact that they might have to throw the ball in that connection that Wilson and Lockett were able to get back, because unfortunately that running game is doing nothing, absolutely nothing on the ground. So it does have to be pass volume. So I'm not super opposed to Wilson, but I think Wentz is the much safer option.
Yeah, the thing about Wilson too is this team has had a couple of chances to bounce back. Granted, they're at home. Not that it's mattered when you're 3-8, but you're going up against a decent defense. It's in division. I know the Colts Texans are division as well, but the last time they played, it was a 10.5 point line, and the Colts smashed that. And clearly, there isn't that big of a gap, I think. And I'm actually saying this is the benefit of Seattle and giving the benefit to Russell Wilson and Seattle. It's just such a tougher matchup. But at the same time, and this is why I lead all that up to ask this, could we not see blowout factor? I mean, could we not easily see Carson Wentz getting maybe 2.5 quarters worth of work where at least Russell Wilson most likely is going to be behind and have to throw the football, granted against a better defense and against better competition, but at least in game flow, more often throwing than maybe Carson Wentz, whose team could be up 38-10 going into the second half. Does that make sense, Sarah?
It does. It does. Yeah. I think the upside is probably there with him. I don't think we'll have that upside with Carson Wentz just because we kind of know how the game script is going to go. But yeah, so if you want to go more upside, I can see the argument for Russell Wilson. But if you need the safe bet, you need those guaranteed 15 to 20, then yeah, I'm going with Carson Wentz.
I mean, I agree. You could call what Russell Wilson a ceiling play, but it's a higher total game. You know, you just made the example that they're up 38-10. How did they get to 38-10? Yes, I know one. Yeah, I mean, that's the easy. I literally preempted with a yes before you even said the answer. We know
you're smarter than me.
But ultimately, when a player like Taylor goes off for 50 points, that means the offense as a whole has been very, very productive. Sometimes those running backs don't get in the end zone on their goal line carries. They have to pass on 3rd and goal, and suddenly those fantasy points get distributed to the passing game instead. So give me the team that's going to score 38 points, even if it's in 3 quarters, most of the time. Median projection goes to Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Look, I'm sorry. I'm a little biased. I'm holding a Jonathan Taylor plus 2,000 MVP ticket, so I'm trying to just speak it into existence here. Okay, speak it into existence.
So good right now.
Hey, all right. That's all I'm trying. I'm not getting ahead of the game by any means. All right, so let's keep it moving here. Had another one on the chat as well about tight ends, Doyle or Ingram. Matt, let's start with you.
Just from a game environment standpoint, when I have 2 tight ends that I know that 0 targets is in their range of outcomes, I'm usually going to just go with the game environment play, the Houston Texans defense. Nothing to be scared about. A 10-point favorite is usually someone we're going to go with their auxiliary options for. So Doyle by hair, I guess.
Yeah, I recall if last week, I think Evan Ingram might have been one of my sneaky starts. And the reasoning was that this should have been the perfect matchup for him last week against Philadelphia. And he completely was, I mean, it was like, okay, it was adequate, but it just, if that's the best that we can expect out of him, I'm going to have to pivot towards Jack Doyle for the exact same reason that Matt was saying, just a much better game situation.
All right, last one here. We'll get back to some more throughout the show, so don't worry. Keep them coming by all means. For Tara and Matt. David on the chat. Love the channel. Thank you. We love you back. Just hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe. It's the equivalent of like a digital elbow bump now because not many people are still fisting. That's fine. But let's do this. Pick 2, half PPR, Javonte Williams, Jamal Williams, or Saquon Barkley. Matt, let's start there. We just did a lot about Saquon Barkley. So maybe out of circumstance, you're going the top 2.
Yeah, so Javonte and Jamal. It's funny, I have Jamal Williams and Saquon Barkley basically neck and neck in projections. And I think Javonte, assuming Melvin Gordon plays, he's the one you got to leave out. I really like the talent. I like his evaded tackles. The underlying metrics are good, but you got to go with the volume here. And it's Jamal Williams getting all the touches likely in Detroit, and Saquon, who basically is the only relatively reliable option in New York with Mike Glennon starting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think maybe this question's a little different if Melvin Gordon is not playing. But again, Denver is playing Kansas City, so I don't know if that's the best game script for them to be relying on those running backs. So, unfortunately for me, I think I agree that unless Melvin Gordon's out, I feel pretty confident in going with both Saquon and with, what was the other option?
Jamal Williams.
Jamal Williams, yeah.
All right, so let's look. Dalvin Cook's out. go back to some injury stuff here. We'll hit our 30-plus performers you see here, and then we have to give you a couple of sneaky starts before we get out. So let's look. Dalvin Cook out. We know what happens here. Madison, clearly, if anybody has had him on the team, on their respective teams, then they're running with him. Is there any other value, though? And I'm just looking at Minnesota as a whole here and how much the offense may shift, may change. Granted, it's week to week, so we have to factor in the matchup by all means. But, Tara, just the obvious is, okay, well, the switch is at running back. But they're at Detroit. We've seen this before where it's easy to just let down against the Lions team because anybody can beat Detroit. I don't know if maybe things change and all of a sudden there's more emphasis on throwing. And if that's the case, who would benefit from that? So it's not just Dalvin Cook being out going to Madison. It's also the offense as a whole.
Yeah, I meant on the offense as a whole. Again, when we look at Alexander Madison, we've seen that, both times where he got the opportunity to get the start, he got 25 plus carries, 100 plus yards. So we can feel pretty confident in that direction for him. But I think if this offense is having to, be in a slightly competitive game, and even if it's not, I still think that they'll want to heavily involve Justin Jefferson. I still think when you look at those goal line opportunities, you see Adam Thielen probably getting a touchdown. Yet again, it's something that at this point we can come to expect. Maybe an opportunity down at the goal line for Conklin as well. So I think with the way that they'll probably be able to use the ball, move the ball on this defense, that we'll see a lot more people involved and have a lot more scoring opportunities. So I'm okay with being all in on multiple options within this offense.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in pretty much agreement here. You got to go with Madison. The way that Minnesota wants to win football games relies so heavily on the rushing attack. And honestly, Madison is a slightly stronger play when Cook is out than, sometimes Cook is in a smash spot, but sometimes Cook can't get to that ceiling, especially in like a DFS perspective, that the other top tier running backs, because they still like Madison in certain situations. No concerns here about him. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of the person on the depth chart behind him, but there's also no concerns about Amir Abdullah at this point. CJ Ham will probably get a few looks, but he is by no means a bell cow back. So if I'm all in on Alexander Madison, it's simply, am I okay just having multiple options here? Yes, I don't mind stacking up multiple wide receiver and running back options. Say you have a Justin Jefferson or an Adam Thielen, not concerned. This team concentrates so much of their fantasy production to these top three options, and Tyler Conklin mixes in there sometimes, but ultimately, I don't think if you're at a trade deadline, just because Alexander Madison is a new running back for your team that already was relying on one of these awesome receivers, you got to make a move suddenly because you have too many Vikings.
All right, some more start sits coming in. Before that, though, let's look at Darren Waller and the situation out in Vegas. You all, I'm sure, are going to mention a guy that we'll come back to at some point with me later in the show, but that's fine because then I can just say, like Matt said, or like Tara said earlier, and just steal your points before we get out of here. So let's look, and Matt, let's start with you, get to Tara and your thoughts here as well on what's going on in Vegas with Darren Waller first and foremost, and again, that trickle down.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about some tight end direct pivots there for sure. But I think, honestly, this is good news for Hunter Renfro's target floor. And honestly, Renfro has been one of the heaviest targeted wide receivers in the second half of the season anyway. At a minimum, I think you could see him get 7 or 8 targets. At a maximum, I could easily see double-digit targets against a Washington defense that is still one of the worst in the NFL against opposing passing attacks in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed, which is just fantasy points allowed, but contextualized for the offenses that they faced this season. They are third worst in the NFL behind just the Jets and, believe it or not, the Rams. And that means they're very attackable. They're very attackable regardless of the personnel. So I think this game has sneaky shootout potential. I definitely am still going with these options below Foster Moreau. Look for Deshaun Jackson to possibly have another big game here.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of those games I think where we'll talk about later as well from multiple aspects. But It's funny when you look at this team and then Washington as well. They're two teams that they integrate the tight end position so much that when one goes down, they don't change their game plan. So again, I do feel super comfortable going with Hunter Renfrow. The double-digit targets make sense, and then I do feel comfortable going with Foster Moreau as well. We've seen that when he steps in, the target share is there for him. In week 7, he did very well. He caught 6 of his 6 targets, and then last week, one super good in terms of his efficiency, but he did see 5 targets once Waller went down. So I think the writing's on the wall for him to get a decent target share there and be a usable asset. So nothing really changes much for me. Derek Carr is leading the NFL in pass yards, crazy, right? But he is that guy. So again, it's a high volume game. So this is a great opportunity for these offensive players.
Yeah, can I add one thing?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think the biggest reason that these teams can do that is because they actually their front office is very conscientious about their personnel with their backups. Yeah. Darren Waller is a freak athlete because he came into the league as a wide receiver and then converted to a tight end. So he looks like an off the charts athlete for the tight end position. So too does Foster Moreau. He's upper percentile if you go to playerprofiler.com in agility score, speed score, 40-yard dash, catch radius. This is a hyper athlete despite being a mid-round pick. So given the opportunity, as Tara said, he should be able to thrive in this offense, which doesn't have a ton of options.
It's a really underrated point, I think, across the board in sports, especially in football, right? And it's to the NFL, and it's also to recruiting in college, where if you have somebody you rely on so much, you have to try and mirror that, knowing that the talent itself, but it really is the trickle down to everybody else. Like, you're not now asking Derek Carr to do something completely foreign to what he's been doing when the team has been successful. So, and again, we'll come back to wide receiver, specifically Djax, on this here as well. All right, let's get to a couple of more here on the chat. We appreciate all your start sits here. And Joshua up next, another tight end question. We talked about Gesicki in Miami, especially in this game with Tua and it benefiting Tua. Also, Devontae Parker back, so you have to factor that in here. Or TJ Hawkinson, who has been up and down, but probably more down. But who can you blame out there in Detroit? So, Tara, Hawkinson or Gesicki?
Oh, that's tough. I might have to. I do like Gesicki, but I might have to go with Hawkinson. I know things have been kind of unstable and unreliable there, but again, you talked about earlier, these divisional games, they can be situations where it gets close, and we could see a situation where they're able to be competitive and they've got Jamal Williams. They might use Jamar Jefferson, but they might have to rely heavily on TJ Hawkinson within the absence of DeAndre Swift. So again, yeah, I might be okay with going with Hawk in this situation. It's tough. It's very close.
Yeah, this one is really close. Unstable and unreliable, that is the entire tight end position outside of a few top tier options. So not just Hawkinson if you're feeling like it's up and down for your tight end position here. But I still see a player who can get 8 to 12 targets when the matchup is right. Minnesota in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed specifically to tight ends, not a number I like to look at a whole lot or put a lot of weight on, I should say. They are number 1 as well in that metric. So, interesting, but I still think that the better player here is Hawkinson, the better game environment. Unfortunately, it goes to Gesicki. In the true toss-up, I'm going to go with the projection, which currently says Hawkinson.
All right, our buddy Kicks in the house. Logan Thomas or Zach Ertz? Now, I know we're going to talk a lot, right, about Logan Thomas here, so I don't want to step over our later segment. So if you like, you can kind of dance around it, or maybe you just bash Ertz and give us all the reasons why, Matt, we should stay as far away from Zach Ertz as humanly possible.
Oh, I'm not going to tell you to do that, especially if they start a backup quarterback again. Again, Kyler Murray, no guarantee to play here. I'm still sorry. What was the other? Was it Zach Ertz or
Logan Thomas?
Logan Thomas. Yes. Excuse me. No. I was literally just looking up stats on Logan Thomas, where I was thrilled to see that he had a 78% snap share when he was supposed to be limited last week against Seattle. This is a player who, in his 3 healthy starts before last week, he was an 100% snap share type of player. Huge role in that offense. I think if you've got Logan Thomas, you're playing him, but that doesn't mean Zach Ertz is a complete stay away.
Yeah, and then I know that Hopkins and Kyler Murray are game time decisions, but some of that language that was used makes it seem like, yeah, they're game time decisions, but I think it's more so leaning towards that Hopkins will be playing this week. So if we've got him coming back, I think that does kind of change the dynamic a little bit. And we mentioned obviously we love this game between Washington and Vegas because we're all in on multiple of these players, but again, Logan Thomas is someone who can see a very significant and guaranteed target share as long as he's on the field. And so I do anticipate him going back to 100% snap count this week. So I might lean towards Logan Thomas in the event that DeAndre Hopkins is coming back and healthy.
One more here. We'll keep it moving as well. Back to some 30-plus point, any injury that we may have forgotten as well. Latavius Murray or Naheem Heinz? Let's start, Tara.
That is a very interesting question because they both actually have pretty decent matchups. Obviously, we've got Houston for Naheem Heinz, where if they get up big, they're obviously relying on the run game, and they could also give a decent amount of carries and pass opportunities to Heinz. On the other end, the Ravens have a good matchup as well. But I think I might lean towards going with Naeem Heinz in this situation. I think the upside might be there for him a little bit more. Just because I think in this situation, Pittsburgh is kind of struggling both against the run and the pass. So I think that Baltimore may run a decent amount, but I think it might be Lamar time for him through the air and on the ground. So I probably lean towards going with Naeem Heinz.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I think if it is a full PPR, it makes it much easier for me. Naheem Heinz is the answer in that situation. The way Latavius Murray gets to a higher score than Heinz, or really a higher score than his projected points, which is probably around, what would you say, 6 to 8 PPR fantasy points, is he scores multiple times. At the very least, Naheem Heinz can get there with a mega target day, which sometimes that happens. He gets targeted multiple times. It hasn't happened so much this year with the way Jonathan Taylor has been playing all over the field, but I still think Heinz in a full PPR and Latavius only in, say, a standard league. It's a true toss-up in half PPR. If you're going for floor, I think it's Heinz.
So one more on the injury front, and with J.D. McKissic, and then also what happens now with Antonio Gibson. I can't imagine much change. As somebody who has rostered Gibson pretty much every week, nothing changes on my end. It's just now the pivot end, right? Like I might have gone back and forth on a matchup, or when Gibson shared the news to the world that he was dealing with an injury that the team clearly didn't want the world to know. I had a little concerns, granted, but he's must start. I mean, even earlier this month, 24 carries. Like we see the 29 carries, he just comes off. So nothing changes with Gibson, but I wonder if anything, something changes for the better, Tara, in the passing game now for Gibson.
Yeah, I think it might. I mean, you look last week, he had 7 targets. He caught all 7 of them. It's funny. He's a great pass catching back. He just doesn't get that opportunity. So with McKissic out, I would have to imagine that they pivot those passes to him versus Jarrett Patterson. So I do think there's probably some more upside there for him in the pass catching game.
All right, we got to say that Ron Rivera, maybe this is coach speak, but he was talking up Wendell Smallwood of Eagles fame, backbench of the Eagles back in the day.
Has he really not played anywhere else where he has to be a former Eagle? Jeez.
I'm just ribbing you, Eitan. But Smallwood could theoretically play the McKissic role. I'm just not sure he could play it as well. And if he blows a block or two, or muffs a target that McKissic would normally have caught, you could just see Gibson finally getting that workhorse level opportunity. And if that's the case, you're staring at an RB1, a top 12 running back rest of season. I don't think that McKissic looks like he's going to have a season-ending injury, but anytime he's out at this point, it's all systems go with Gibson. I think his floor and ceiling just get increased, especially with how much we like this matchup against the Raiders.
It makes sense. It definitely does. And I think that's the bigger issue here now is just beyond Gibson, what happens with the squad. And you mentioned Smallwood. So clearly it's not like Gibson's going to get every single touch and look out of the backfield. Nothing like that ever works in the NFL. But I want to come back because Michael has an interesting question in the chat. We've already talked about Zach Ertz in this capacity as far as what's going on with Kyler Murray, and then really if Murray doesn't go. So Michael's question, and Matt, throw it right back with you, and then we'll get into some 30-plus point performers and sneaky starts, of course. Let's look at this one here from Michael. Christian Kirk or Elijah Moore, full PPR.
Looking it up now. Okay, so Elijah Moore is facing that Philadelphia defense that has been pretty darn solid over the last month of the season. And Christian Kirk is facing a Chicago defense that has started to give up chunk plays. You know, the best example we can give is last week's Josh Reynolds big touchdown. They're 23rd. That's bottom 10 in the NFL in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. This is a situation where they're projected within 1 point of each other in full PPR. So I'm actually going to lean Christian Kirk, even though he has the slightly lower median projection. You know, the volatility of wide receivers. They don't usually hit right at that median.
Real quick, Tara, before you jump in, can I just follow up with you, Matt? What happens if Murray's out? How much does that change your opinion?
It's probably easier to just go with the quarterback who has his starter. Although, you know, I think, oh man. Actually, I'm gonna change my answer.
That's fine.
Yeah,
this is not a game
I've just
show.
been
You're
surprised.
not locked into this.
I'm just been surprised with Colt McCoy's competency, and it's still the better matchup. So I think I might still lean Kirk.
See, now you have the two scenarios to factor in here, Tara.
Yes. I will say I don't think the quarterback situation changes it much for me. I mean, honestly, I love Kyler Murray. Obviously, he's the better quarterback, but Colt McCoy is stable enough to where there's not going to be that huge of a difference for Christian Kirk. The way I look at this, in my opinion, is the much safer option is definitely Christian Kirk. The higher ceiling, in my opinion, is going to be Elijah Moore. Again, when we look at what he did last week against Houston, again, you know, they were up in that game. They didn't have to really chuck the ball. He still saw 8 targets. So at least the target share is still there and they're not pivoting away from him. We just need Zach Wilson to be just a little bit better. You know what I'm saying? But in my opinion, I think, you know, we know that the ceiling is just a lot higher for Elijah Moore. So if you need to get there in points, I would be pivoting to that direction. If you want to be safe, go with Christian Kirk.
Okay. Makes sense. Just wanted to make sure we get all of them out there. You have any more, please hit us up, hit that thumbs up button, take advantage of those links below from Yahoo. $10 free. That's for everybody. And then if you're new to Yahoo, well, click that link below. We'll give you 1 month free of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Again, all we ask, just hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Any start sit questions, we have another 20 plus minutes to get to those as well. Now, each and every week here on this Friday show, we hit the 30 plus point performers. And looking at this list, I'm confident. I'm very confident. Now, I'm going to go last here because people want to hear from you two first. Let's start. Matt, we'll throw it right back to you. Boomerang this back here. Then Tara, and then I'll end out here. You're 30 plus. I have a feeling we're going to go 3 for 3. And maybe that's just because mine is the most outlandish, and I'm trying to just subtly bring mine into your two here.
Okay. All right. I see how it goes, but I'm pretty confident in my guy this week, Justin Jefferson. I actually had him as a pick earlier in the season, fell short, but I have faith in my guy getting back to how he was in week 11 or week 10 compared to week 12 when he only caught 4 of his 9 targets for a measly 83 yards, which is now a down game for Justin Jefferson in the world we live in because Adam Thielen catches 2 touchdowns. You feel like the ceiling game, just like he had 37 points against Green Bay, 22.5 points against, in week 10, it was the Chargers and Detroit in yards allowed per pass attempt, dead last in the NFL. They are in the bottom 5 in the NFL in points allowed per play. Basically, in every per play efficiency metric you could look at, Detroit is one of the worst teams in the NFL defensively. I think Justin Jefferson, as good of a play as Madison is simply because of the opportunity, the volume that's expected, I think Jefferson is the one that could have multiple chunk plays, multiple touchdowns, and that's why he's my 30-plus pick this week.
That's a lot of chalk, Tara. That's a lot of chalk right there in Justin Jefferson pick.
Yes.
We want real answers, right? We want to be right.
Yes. Yes, we would rather be accurate than boisterous. Yes, by all means. No, I'm calling you accurate.
Keep that in mind.
I'm calling you the good one, Matt. All right. I love
My
it.
pick
by
is
the way.
Cooper Kupp.
No, it's great. It was a good one. And look, everything is there. The metrics, the bounce back, is the matchup. Everything is there for Justin Jefferson by all means. So I can't argue. And we've had a lot of conversation. Mike Awesemo here is producing, can confirm. We've had a lot of conversation about Justin Jefferson in the city in which I live over the last year and a half. So by all means, I'm done. I'm shot. Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL. That's all I hear. All right, so let's go from Matt to Tara. Who's your guy?
We're going to step down a little bit, but not too much. It's less chalky, so I guess we're going down. And I'm going with Marquis Brown against Pittsburgh. And really, it comes down to two things with me. It comes down to Pittsburgh's defense and target share. Again, I talked about Pittsburgh's defense a little bit earlier. I think their defense is reeling right now. We're used to seeing Pittsburgh as this big, scary steel curtain defense, and that's not the case anymore. You can throw on them, you can run on them, you can pretty much demolish them. They are 26th and 24th in DVOA against the run and the pass. So when you look at what they did with T. Higgins last week, who had 6 receptions, over 100 yards, and a touchdown against Pittsburgh, I see no reason that Hollywood Brown can't repeat that this week, especially when you look at the fact that he is a high target recipient in that option. 10, 13, 12, 14 in the past 4 games. He's really been consistent in the way that Lamar is looking at him. We just got to make that connection and get a few more big plays. And I think that this is the perfect game for it to happen. So I'm going with Marquis Brown. 30+ points.
Oh, wow. So you go with the wide receiver 9 in points per game while I pick the wide receiver 5. Wow.
I said a little step down,
A little step. All right. That was accurate. That was accurate.
Preempted.
I love the pick. Yeah.
You know what's amazing, though, is like it doesn't compute how Marquis Brown can have 13 targets, 6 grabs, and only 37 yards. And again, even last game that we saw, the 10-8 for only 51. Now, a touchdown is the difference. So there's the variance, right? You get a touchdown in there, and all of a sudden it doesn't look nearly as bad. I'm with you. It sounded like Matt was with you, too, as far as there's a big opportunity from targets and also bounce back from performance. It's just, of all people in the NFL, he's one of the few that I would say, oh, yeah, you give him 13 targets, 6 grabs. Wow, 37 yards and no score. That's odd, but even more reason for you. All right, now I'm going to totally bring this conversation down here, but it's going to happen, all right? And we're going to come back to this very scenario with sneaky starts for the other guy. But as of right now, the Philadelphia Eagles may, and I say may like with some emphasis here, only have 2 running backs to go. Boston Scott may not go. He's still dealing with an illness. It's not COVID, so that's a good sign because illnesses can go away. You can come back. It's not like a bone or a tendon. On the other hand, Jordan Howard, not expected to go. That leaves Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell. Here's the thing. Yes, the Jets' defense, pass defense, atrocious. They're horrific. And the Eagles should throw, and Jalen Hurts should throw, granted. But they've been running the ball so well. Even in that loss last week to the Giants, they went over 200 yards on the ground as a team. It's not just going to be Jalen Hurts, 40 carries on the ground. Miles Sanders is now, and the coach may not like it, but he's going to have to suck it up and deal with it. Miles Sanders is now your feature back in an offense that is designed to run, and then run some more. So, yeah, it'll bump up the other kid we'll talk about in a second. But Sanders also in the passing game stands to benefit from not having the other 2 guys in Scott and Howard. Even if it's just Scott who plays, I think Sanders can still get over 30 or at least to 30. So it's a risk, and that's why we take risks in this segment. But I would take a long, hard look in that game script and see, especially if the Eagles are up big early because they can throw, and then all of a sudden, it's not going to be Jalen Hurts running the clock out. It's going to be more Miles Sanders.
I love this because it's...
Go ahead, Tara. No, we're on the same page. All of us. I can't believe it.
I love this because it's so funny how the season has progressed, and we are back to where we started with Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell, as we originally thought it would be. But now we're hopefully at the point of which where Philadelphia has realized they have to commit to the run. So we've got the guys we always wanted. Now we've got the game plan. We want it to match up.
Don't want to nerd out too hard, but there's a metric floating around the interwebs called pass rate above or below expectation, that expectation model done by some very clever data scientists. They've released it out to the public for free. Really cool. If you look at the chart of the Philadelphia Eagles versus expectation. They start at the most pass heavy above expectation in the league, and it just dive bombs to the bottom. Like historically weird changes. But the Jets, as you said, Eitan, in that metric, schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed that I keep referencing, there's nobody even close to as bad as the Jets. And they've actually looked like a run funnel defense because of the amount of times teams are able to score touchdowns via the rushing attack. So that's good news for Miles Sanders.
Love it. All right, let's keep it moving here. Any more start sits you have, by all means. Deonte Johnson, Jalen Waddle, that's from Nick. So, Tara, let's start. Matt, you can follow up on your thoughts as well here. And again, keep asking you to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for a reason. You can also hit that notification bell so you're not 44 minutes late like Carlos. We love you, Carlos. You're here all the time. You're never late. So hit that notification bell so you can be here right from the drop. So let's start, Tara. Deonte Johnson or Jalen Waddle? Next question on chat.
Oh, that's tough because I love Jalen Waddle. He's a wide receiver 1 at this point. Fantastic rookie year. But you mentioned Devontae Parker, set to potentially come back. So if he's back this week, and we might see a little bit of a tiny shift down in targets. And we've got Deonte, who is the clear target leader in that offense. And I might lean towards Deonte. Especially against Baltimore, where, again, it's a divisional matchup. And I think they might have to throw the ball a lot on Baltimore's defense.
Nick, I hope your team's doing as well as it sounds like it's doing, because if you're deciding between Deonte Johnson and Jalen Waddle, it sounds like your roster is A-okay. I'm going with Deonte as well. Mr. 13 targets is at this point. He's had exactly 13 targets in over 50% of his games. That's bizarre. I guess he hit 14 last week. In some of the stat services I saw, he had 13 once again. Still, just a fantastic player on an offense that doesn't have a lot of touchdown upside. In full PPR, you got to go with Johnson, especially with the personnel changes in Miami.
We got to get to this because I think this is the first. We've done this a couple of times on Sunday on the show with myself, Nick, and RC right here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. But I don't think on a show, now we would never get to this right on a Monday because we'd be judged by Lofty. But our first kicker question, I believe, right? I don't think we've had a kicker question here. Is Matt above a kicker question? I thought,
I would never be. I would never be above a kicker question.
Let's go for it.
Right. Folk or Gano then, Matt?
Folk or Gano? Let's see here. Pulling up. Actually, it's pretty clear. It's Folk.
Yeah.
By a pretty large margin.
Yeah, the Giants, I know he had a couple of kicks, but he just didn't look great either, Tara.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe we're thinking that, with Mike Glennon playing, they'll get close, but no cigar in the end zone, and maybe he'll get more opportunities, but it's still Folk for me again, especially against that Buffalo defense. It should be a very potentially close scoring game because New England is a lot better than people are realizing. They've, made fantastic turnarounds. So I'm going with Nick Folk.
Hey, let's remember here too, that when you look at the difference between the running back 1 in projections and the running back, say 30 in projections, there is a drastic change from that 1 to 30 rank. From the kicker 1 in projections to the kicker 28 in projections, I currently see a 2.3 point difference. This is splitting hairs at the highest order.
That has to be the lone position. I mean, even defense, you would think that there was a significant gap like that.
A little bit
has
more.
To be kicked. But if that doesn't prove why you should ignore a kicker in a draft or should stream kickers each and every week, right? Like in kicker leagues, doesn't that prove that they should be the ultimate afterthought? Now, I'm not saying in real life. I'm just talking about this is not some rant. Oh, Shander, dislike. He said kickers don't matter. No. I'm just saying in fantasy purposes. That's it. Yes. That's all. All right. Yep. Interesting question here from Michael before we end on our sneaky starts. Should he drop Cam Newton for Taylor Heineke? Other quarterback is Cousins. So you're good with Cousins. But if it's a 2 QB league, and we should assume that it is, Tara, you making that move?
Oh, yeah. I actually really love Taylor Heineke as a streamer because, again, similar to Cam Newton, it's that rushing upside. Heineke has that rushing upside that kind of keeps him from being a complete bust. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I don't think he's ever seen below double-digit fantasy points. So I think he's got a really nice safe floor right there. In addition to the passing, which Cam, is a little shaky on that right now. So yeah, I'm good with going with Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, this is the running quarterbacks, but I'm not sure they can actually pass any more zone of my rest of season rankings, where I have basically Taysom Hill, Cam Newton. Well, Taysom Hill when healthy, Cam Newton, Taylor Heineke, all grouped together. It is a true toss-up for me in rest of season rankings with these two. If you need a win and you feel like for some reason you can't start Kirk Cousins in a 1 QB league, that's fine with with Heineke. But I don't think you absolutely have to make the move if it's just a 1 QB league.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought I'm sorry, Tara. I thought you were going to say something else. That's my fault. No, that's my fault. All right, let's hit our sneaky starts here. We each have a pair, but we have time now to stretch this out so we can go one by one. Matt, why don't you start? Then Tara, I'll wrap up, and then we'll swing it back around like a snake draft here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about him already, and I just was so thrilled to see Logan Thomas back to his typical role, the workhorse tight end role that Washington seems to employ in the current iteration of their offense. Against Seattle, 6 targets, which was his second highest target total on the season, catching 3 for 31 yards. Not super impressive, but ultimately, because of the snap share, because of this offense having limited options on the outside, they're just getting healthier in general on the outside, while their backfield is anything but healthy. So I think they're going to need to rely on check down targets to someone other than Antonio Gibson. That leads to Logan Thomas continuing to see a high workload in the passing game. In this sneaky shootout spot, one of the highest total games on the slate, I really think you can do worse at tight end than Logan Thomas this week.
Well, we are in love with Washington and Vegas this week. It is our favorite game. I'll get to that one in a second. But before I get to that one, I'll go with my sneaky start. My first one is Juwan Jennings. Deebo Samuel is going to be out, and Jennings is going to be that number 2 wide receiver with Brandon Ayuk as that lead back or the lead wide receiver. So I think obviously we'll have Ayuk and Kittle leading the way. Elijah Mitchell will obviously be very involved as well. He's been fantastic on the ground, but there's a void there. And one little fun stat. I don't know why I even went looking for this, but I went through the Seattle games and opposing quarterbacks. I had to go all the way back to September before I found a game where opposing quarterbacks threw for less than 35 attempts. Wow. So in my opinion, I would feel pretty confident in saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to throw the ball a decent amount. Do the math. There's a certain amount of targets that have to go to Jennings. Last week, he got 2 of his 3 targets with a touchdown, and that was just on 37% of snaps. So I really think the opportunity is there. And if you're looking for a guy who was definitely available on waivers, it's him. I promise. The vast majority of leagues, he's a great pivot.
Love it.
Hey, I put Ayuk as my first sneaky start, and then I saw Tara put Jennings down there, and I was like, all right, Matt, dig deeper. Come on, let's go. So way to make us all step up our game with that pick. I really like it.
Yeah. I went with that 1% ownership area.
Oh, it's great. And look, Matt, you balanced it out with your Justin Jefferson play, so it worked.
Ooh.
This is great.
What's your address? I'll send you some cranberry sauce.
Look at that. Canned too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You need the sliced can. That's how we'll do it.
Let me go back to this game once again, which now the 3 of us have doomed it. It's going to be a 7-3 football game. Nobody's going to do anything of note. And it's just the nature of how things go. Now, granted, I'm hoping for the opposite. And now I have extra attention on this game by all means because of our conversations. But I'll go back to it and go to Deshaun Jackson because of, I think, a couple of things. Really, he hasn't slowed down, which is amazing. I don't know how this is physically possible for him to not have been able to slow down just a little bit. We also know that Washington's pass defense is bad. And granted, numbers will tell you that it may be getting a little bit better. But I'll go back to Tara's point about Carr leading the league, one of the better passes when it comes to yardage right now. You're giving him time. No Chase Young. There's nobody in front of him. Guess what more time means? You're able to throw the football down the field farther. Guess what that means? Deshaun Jackson can get down the field. This has D-Jax written all over it as far as a couple of big plays. And the beauty of it, because I saw it here for years, Deshaun only needs 3 grabs to be an impact player across the weekend. So I really like Deshaun as a sneakier start. I think Renfrow is an obvious play that people will go to. You have an option here with Deshaun as well.
Totally.
All right, Matt, we'll swing it back to you here.
All right. Well, this one, now we're getting off the wall. Now we're talking, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be talking about a tight end that is almost certainly sitting on your waiver wire. That is a 10-point underdog. But at least they are playing in a high total game when there aren't that many high total games on this slate. Brevin Jordan, 3 targets for the Houston Texans over the last 2 weeks. We saw his snap share skyrocket, which is really what I want to talk about. We don't have a lot of tight ends at this point of the season who have a drastic change in playing time, unless we're talking about players like Thomas, who are coming back from injury to a role that they had already established. In that regard, James O'Shaughnessy on Jacksonville, look out for him to replace Dan Arnold 1-for-1. I digress. Against the Jets last week, you had Brevin Jordan playing on 60% of the snaps when the highest he had previously played was 32%. So just because he gets 3 targets, I'm seeing the highest routes run of his, I believe his career. Yes, he's a first-year player. And of course, he gets in the end zone, 11.3 fantasy points. That's going to get him on people's radar as well. I think you could continue to see his role increase, and they're going to be passing if they're playing from behind.
I love this because I play in a 2 tight end league, and I had now granted it's looking good that Pat Freiermuth is going to play, but I had both Waller and Pat Freiermuth as my tight ends. And in a panic, I had to go to the waivers where there are literally no tight ends. And one of the guys that I went for is definitely Brevin Jordan for the exact same reasons that you said. Great option. For me, I'm going to go back to the Washington game, and I'm going to talk about Taylor Heideggy. He is who I think I already talked about earlier this week. He's one of my favorite streaming options, again, because he's just such a safe option. And when you look at that Vegas defense, last week they gave up a massive game to Dak Prescott. And Dak Prescott and Taylor Heineke are 2 completely different guys in their passing ability, but it's the volume potential here. Prescott had 375 yards on 47 attempts and 2 touchdowns. And when we've talked multiple times about the fact that Carr leads the NFL in total yards. So we're talking about a matchup for Heineke where Carr is going to throw the ball, and the Raiders defense will give up a lot of volume. So it seems like a perfect matchup for him to get a potentially high scoring game. And at the very least, he has that safe rushing upside floor. So he's one of my favorite streaming options this week at quarterback.
Great. I love the fact that the target share in this game for our show is like 70%.
Start them all. We're so happy.
Washington, Vegas. Absolutely. Real quick.
Well, sorry.
No.
I think we can say that there aren't a lot of games, especially in the Sunday 1 o'clock or 4 p.m. slot, that really blow us away in terms of game environments, right? Where both teams look like the most likely outcome is that they're both going to be passing. Obviously, we talked a lot about Indy, Houston. That's one of them. That's not the highest total, but one that could shoot out. Las Vegas, Washington, a little bit more obvious. I guess LA, Cincinnati in that regard is one that didn't get a lot of love despite being one of the highest total games on the slate here.
Right. And I think the Bengals Chargers is maybe the exception to this. But look, even that Bucks Falcons game, it's a little bit high. It's a full point higher, but it's a 10.5 point line. This is a 49.5 point total with a 1 point spread. So the expectation, to your point, and the books are agreeing, is high scoring game that's close. So yeah, a game that's in the 30s or low 30s, something along those lines. All right, I'll leave you with this. We do have one we have to get to because I don't know if we're getting trolled or if it's just a serious question, but we can't discern the difference. I'll leave you with the last sneaky start. We'll go back to this, and this is pending. If Boston Scott and Jordan Howard are out, and you have access to Kenny Gainwell, grab him. Because, again, it's a similar situation where we've even seen, and Tara brought this up as far as we come back really to where we began in the season. Well, when things weren't working on the ground, Gainwell was in the air game. Gainwell was there in the 2-minute drill, in the red zone. So that, again, a guy who's probably available. I don't think Miles Sanders would be available. This is just you having to start him on your bench. I would think Gainwell would still be available right now in more leagues than not. just keep an eye on Boston Scott. If Scott and Howard are out, I would pound on that with Gainwell. All right, last one here. And I'm assuming this is a real question because every question is real until proven otherwise. So, Matt, and then Tara, you can take us home on this. I don't know where you have your rankings set here on kickers, Matt, but Evan McPherson or Matt Prater?
Oh, man. You know what? I'm not pulling up the rankings. It's EMAC 2024, so we're doing Evan McPherson. Oh man, it's a toss-up. I'm seeing them literally right next to each other with the exact same to the decimal point projection. So EMAC 2024 all the way.
Everybody's right next to each other.
Yes. I completely agree.
I love it. All right. EMAC 2024. I love it. Fantastic. Thank you all for hanging with us at It's Terra Time, at Draftaholic for Tara and Matt, respectively, on Twitter at Shader Show for me. Hit those links below on the way out after you already hit that thumbs up and subscribe button, please. Help us out, and then we'll help you out. Go to Yahoo, $10 free. And if you're new to Yahoo, click that link below, and you'll get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Speaking of which, we'll see you all on Sunday, technically, 11:45 a.m. for the Live Before Lock on the season-long channel. And then we're back on Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern. Tons of video-on-demand content for you. For Tara, for Matt, for Mike, Awesemo producing. Have a great week.